Hi, you have reached the HCP Schedule Smart channel and you are welcome to subscribe to the channel. My name is Tal Levanon and I want to share this case study with you. This talk is about how the HCP reflected the status of the project throughout the project's life and what can be learned from it. The case study is of a project called Light Rail, Hadassah and Kerem, Infra 1. What does Infra 1 mean? Infra 1 is a shortcut for infrastructure. Infra 1 consists of moving the infrastructure and opening a lane for the next project called Infra 2. Infra 2 is the franchise project in which he builds the tracks, the systems and operates the light train. Many thanks to Rami Amsis, the project manager, for all the photos. A few words before we dive into the schedule. The project takes place in Hadassah in Jerusalem. The project area is all that is surrounded by the orange lines, including the Hadassah Hospital and the Hebrew University. What does that mean? Imagine performing the complexity of engineering work next to traffic, hospitalization of patients, children's daycare, students, exams, all together in one place. Project specifications. The project contains of all these main structures and more. For example, the electrical structure, rectifier, acoustic wall, sidewalk cantilever bridge, underground pedestrian crossing, morgue bridge, Hadassah bridge, warehouse, driver's room and transformer's electrical room, the western junction. In addition, they also have the nurses' parking lot, the road to Sapil, traffic roundabout, and more. All this complexity is carried out at the same time as another project. The Ora Hadassah project consists of 3 bridges and has its complexity. This is the boundary line between the 2 projects. For all its complexity, having 2 contractors work at the same area at the same time, that is a matter for a different talk. I only mention it because it's a spoiler. The project schedule. The biggest obstacle to overcome in the schedule lies within the area of the underground passage combined with the morgue bridge and the Hadassah bridge. This area has 2 possible solutions. The first solution is to close the road completely. Once the road is closed, it is possible to dig out the entire road and build the underground passage in one go. The second solution is to close different sections of the road at a time, which means moving traffic to the northern section of the road while carrying out the work in the southern section, and then move the traffic to the southern side and carry out the work on the north side. We initially built 2 possible skeletal schedules. A short schedule, which includes the closure of the road and its duration was 36 months. And a long schedule, which includes traffic transfers and leaving the university road open for traffic. This schedule lasts 44 months. It was defined in the tender that Hadassah would choose between the 2 alternatives within a few months of its start, and by then 2 different schedules would have to be built. In reality, Hadassah decided that the road would remain open to traffic shortly after the NTP, notice to proceed. Therefore, only the long schedule took effect and was used as the work schedule. What were the areas for delivery? Since different areas in the project are delivered to different entities, 4 milestones for delivery have been defined. Milestone number 6 was the delivery of Hadassah Bridge, which is also known as the Terminus Bridge, which is named after the station that is the last station on the line, 31 months from the NTP. Milestone number 7, the entire area called outside Hadassah, 25 months from the NTP. Milestone number 8, the area called inside Hadassah, 37 months. Milestone 6, 7, and 8 are delivered to the franchise. The rest of the project was delivered partially to the Jerusalem municipality and partially to Hadassah. The target for completion was 44 months from NTP. For those of you who are wondering, where is milestone number 9? Milestone number 9 is the end of the contractual work, while milestone 10 is the end of delivery. Who are the main participants in the project? There were a lot of participants in the project. I'll mention them in a nutshell. The 3 most significant and most important are, of course, the owner of the project, Moriah Jerusalem Development Company, the project management, David Ackerstein Engineering Company, and the contractor, YD Barzani. Moriah has its own bosses, the Transportation Master Plan Team and AGIS, who are the entities that represent the Ministry of Transportation and the Ministry of Finance, and are in charge of all the overall planning of the project. There are all the planners who are constantly required to provide answers. The leading ones, Shlomo Aronson Architects, and the constructor, Gash. There are the other planners for each area of expertise, such as traffic, electricity, sewage, water, lighting, and more. On the other hand, there are the project's recipients, the Hebrew University and Hadassah Hospital, who are fully inside the work zone during the whole process and also suffer from the noise and the work. And Shafir, the franchise, who will receive the project. On top of all these, there are also, for example, consultants, such as the one who is speaking right now, the schedule consultant. And there are also a safety consultant and other consultants. But we will focus on the 3 main participants as we examine the aspects of the schedule. What was the work method in the schedule? Are you familiar with the situation where the contractor submits a schedule, the project manager sends comments back, then he submits the schedule again and receives comments again and again, and process can repeat itself for half a year, 8 months, and often won't end until the project's end? In practice, this is a project that is executed without a basic schedule. Are you familiar with this situation? Because this is not the case right here. If you want to read about the method and about its advantages and disadvantages, go to our blog at hcp-consulting.com/together, and you will also know how we can work together and not separately. What does the method say in a nutshell? First, the contractor submits a detailed schedule. Then, from this point onwards, the contractor works with the project manager and the schedule consultant together in order to build the basic schedule and update it every month. All schedules and their implications are reported to Moriah, from the submission of the detailed schedule until closing the basic schedule and any monthly update every month. In addition, going forwards from the basic schedule and its updates every month, an HCP-Go analysis was performed per each milestone. By the way, you can do it too. Download the HCP-Go for your MS project and analyze your projects with the HCP-Go right away. What does the HCP-Go analysis do? The first and most basic thing, it gives you 2 metrics. 1. The number of tasks yet to be completed in the project from the timestamp from which the analysis is performed. 2. The number of connections between the tasks. The goal here is to see a decline all the time. If we see an increase, that means there is some problem. As you can see, the basic schedule contains more than 1,100 activities and almost 1,600 connections. We can see that during most months there is a decline, but occasionally we spot an increase in the numbers. That means that something has happened during those months. To better understand what we are dealing with, let's look at a small part of the HCP analysis and its meanings. Firstly, the key dates in the schedule. The earliest start date is January 14th, 2018. The project's planned end date is September 13th, 2021. the range of date analyzed from beginning to end. Hence, the analysis is performed on the whole project. The effective date is the date on which we perform the analysis. This analysis was performed when the basic schedule was finalized, which happened almost 4 months after the NTP. Between you and me, I'd say that closing a basic schedule of 1100 tasks in 4 months isn't bad at all. We might have been able to improve and shorten it, and yet most projects of this size fail to do even that. The number of activities to perform, 1105. Number of connections, 1554. The next thing we have is interesting. The HCP maps the network's tasks by paths according to the connections between the tasks and searches for the most critical paths by their HCP duration slack. Who will be the most critical path? According to Pareto 80-20, we know that 20% of the paths will make 80% of the problem. Where can we find those 20%? We will look for all the longest paths, those that will have a duration slack of up to 20% of the project's duration. In other words, we will look for all the paths whose duration will be 80% of the project's duration and above. If more than 50,000 paths are found, the margin will be reduced from 20% to 10% of the project duration and then to 5% and so on. If less than 10 paths are found, the range will increase. Sounds like a range between 10 paths and 50,000 paths is a bit big. In reality, it works. And what had happened in our project? The HCP tells us, and we just need to pay attention. At a range of only 3% of the project duration, which is only 1.3 months, we have found 925 paths, of which 551 are redundant and 374 are unique. You're probably asking, what do these numbers tell us? 374 paths represent the number of processes we need to manage, and all they have is up to 1.3 months of duration slack. 1.3 months, that's only 5 weeks. A second question you will probably ask is, wait, what exactly are redundant paths? That is a good question. If there is a path A, B, C, D, E, F, and there is a link between B and E, then in fact, another path has been created, A, B, E, F. Everything that happens on the short path will also happen on the long path, which means that the short path is redundant to the long path. Do we need to remove the short path? Most of the time, the answer will be yes. Sometimes we might need the link since it reminds us of something unique, and in these cases, we will leave it. When we map the paths by HCP, the short path creates some white noise for us because it creates the illusion of a short path with a large duration slack, which, in fact, isn't real at all. Therefore, the HCP-Go knows how to remove all those redundant paths, and it extracts all the information from the project network. So, we have 551 redundant paths here. Now, let's see the most significant remark. This remark says the following. Note that more than 50,000 paths were identified within duration slack of 5% of the project range analyzed. What does this remark mean? 5% of the duration of 44 months project equals 2.2 months, meaning we found 925 paths in 1.3 duration slack months. But in 2.2 months, we jumped to more than 50,000 paths in the project. Okay. So, how do we read all this information besides seeing lots of numbers with one short and relevant graph which says to us what is the overall expectation of project success and the expectation that the project will be completed on time, per scope, and on budget. The table is calculated by mapping the paths, creating an HCP score that mathematically analyzes these paths and weighing them with additional parameters. You can read more on the subject on our website inside the HCP-Go Body of Knowledge tab. In addition to the table, we get a histogram which describes the project's path. What do we see here? The longest path, which has zero duration slack, as in have no duration slack at all, are the critical paths according to the HCP. You can see them in the first short bar. There are 6 such paths. Even in the scope of only 6 days of duration slack, we have found 6 paths, 45 paths with about 9 days of duration slack, 54 paths with only 10 days of duration slack, and so on, until we reach a total of 374 paths. Remember that we are talking about 1.3 months here? Well, the histogram teaches us that these paths have accumulated when looking at a duration slack up to 13 days only, and between 1.3 months and 2.2 months, a surge was found with more than 50,000 paths. But what does all of it mean? It means that the project is very packed and has lots of paths with very short slack. Another thing we should notice is the histogram's layout. It took me a long time to reach the following conclusion. A histogram that looks like a normal curve, also called a Gaussian curve or a bell curve, or the beginning of such a curve, describes a project that is feasible, but isn't necessarily easy to execute. On the contrary, a histogram which looks like an EKG test, it isn't good at all. In this project, we see the beginning of such a Gauss curve, so the situation is complex, yet salvageable. What is going on at the construction site? Traffic is marked in green, and the work area at this point of time is marked in yellow, which means transferring the traffic to the north and constructing walls H14 and H15. We have finished the basic schedule by early May, which is the 5th month of the project, and at the end of the month, we performed the first update. The HCP emphasizes that we are analyzing the project from May 27th, 2018 until its end. The amount of tasks and dependencies left to do. The HCP analysis now manages to pass the 3% and 5% we saw earlier and is looking at 10% of the project duration, which is 3.9 months. 26,000 paths found, 18,000 redundant, and the remaining more than 8,000 unique to work with. When we pass the 20% point, there are more than 50,000 paths. And what does the HCP Project Success Expectation Map have to say? The map says there is a big improvement. The expectation of staying on schedule is not bad at all. But it will not be simple. The expectation of staying on budget is low. That is, we will have to pay in order for us to be able to meet our deadline. And what does the histogram have to say? As we move from one month to the other, we see that still at 20% of remaining project duration, there are more than 50,000 paths. However, the histograms all appear to be the beginning of a normal distribution. Not bad! We can work with it until the 9th month. In the 9th month, suddenly the project success expectation map worsened. At 10% of the project duration, there is an explosion to 50,000 paths, and you can see that the histogram has been greatly reduced, and we have 159 unique paths at 5% of the project duration. What's going on in the project? What is the reason for the change in the schedule? The reason is that the contractor began drilling in the morgue bridge, and signs of reinforced concrete were discovered. Measurements were made and the results were sent, and instructions were received for repairing waterproofing for the walls and filling the pits with CLSM. In other words, we have an unexpected issue here, which was immediately reflected in the updated schedule. The HCP analysis reflects this as well in both the project success expectation map and paths histogram. What is going on the site? At the end of October 2018, a traffic transfer was made. The traffic was transferred to the south side of the road and the morgue bridge, so the northern part of the underground crossing and 3 piles from the Hadassah bridge 4, 5 and 6 can be built. And again, we do a monthly monitor and control meeting, and again, we get results. By the 10th month, they are already managing to get past the issue slowly. In the 11th month, we see an improvement. We have 7,600 unique paths at a duration slack of 10% of the project's duration. And what happens in the 12th month? The histogram and project success expectation map change again. What's going on in the project? There is a problem with the northern part of the underground passage. Deficiencies have been discovered in the plans. To deal with the issue, the casting tasks of the northern section were split into 1/3 and 2/3. In addition, no approval has yet been received for traffic reroutes to Phase 2B. To remind you, we are in Stage 2A. There is a municipal approval, but there is still no police approval. All issues are reflected in the schedule, and the HCP analysis shows this immediately. The project success expectation map turns red. The histogram has 103 unique paths, whose duration slack is up to 5% of the project duration, and at this point, it looks more like a project by itself, with its own bell curve that tends to be critical. At 10% duration slack, there is again an explosion of paths, with more than 50,000 paths. We are moving on to the next month. The situation was still difficult, and we can see it both here and in the histogram. A month later, we started to get a handle on the project. Please note, there are more than 36,000 paths here at 10% of the project duration. You can see that we have lots of paths, but they are spread out better over the schedule. The project success expectation map improves. And on the site, we move forward to Phase 2B on April 16th, 2019. Traffic is rerouted to the north side, and the southern part of the underground passage, the retaining wall, and the stairs can be constructed. On the 16th month update, on the one hand, the project success expectation map looks good. We can see a lot of paths and map them at 20% duration slack. We have 3,428 paths. On the other hand, we get something that looks like 2 bell curves. What's really going on here? Why does it look like we have 2 projects? This is because all of the following areas are within 20% range critical and hidden critical paths. North side infrastructure on University Street, and also rearranging the main entrance, and also Phase B underground passage, and also traffic reroute 2C, and also south side infrastructure on University Street, and also wall H19, and also Hadassah Bridge terminus. All these are in all the paths. It seems as if we have several independent projects. We move on. The 17th month, 1,351 unique paths, and we see the different areas. And again, in the 18th month, we have a big problem, which is reflected in the project success expectation map and the histogram. And what's going on here? We have problems with constructing an L-shaped pipeline and pipeline on the south side of the University Street. The condensate pipe requires 6 inches, but it was designed as 4 inches only, so the design plan needs to be updated. This inhibits the high voltage electrical infrastructure. On wall H19, a new instruction was received for the cancellation of existing seam and its replacement by a new seam where the water pipe goes through the wall. And at the terminus bridge, a time frame window was received from the university to drill piles because, please note, we are in June. This is the end of the second semester, and in July the university exams take place. So, it is not possible to drill whenever needed. The project management needs to coordinate with the university when they can drill. But the worst thing is not all of this. These are all in the hidden critical paths. The critical path is changing and is related to the Ora Hadassah project. Remember the spoiler from the beginning? The only entry to the Ora Hadassah construction site is through Hadassah, meaning all of its tools, trucks, and materials must pass through Hadassah. At this point in time, this is delaying the Hadassah project in the construction of all the supporting walls located at the same point between the two projects. In order to complete on time both Ora Hadassah and Hadassah, a process of a flat rate project test begins. The objective is to test whether it is possible to complete both projects on time, or even shorten the duration of the Hadassah project. We're moving forward, starting to get a bit of a handle on the matter. The HCP project success expectation map is improving and the histogram looks not bad. On the site, traffic reroutes to the southern side after we have completed the southern part of the underground passage and the southern pipeline. Now, piles number 1, 2, and 3 of Hadassah Bridge and the access plate need to be constructed. Things look reasonable in the 20th month, and in the 21st month, again, a lot of new problems emerge. On the 22nd month, we see a change. The project success expectation map is good, and the histogram shows that the project is starting to squeeze in the direction of the critical paths. What's going on? On one hand, the delay caused by the link between the Ora Hadassah project and the Hadassah project taken its toll. On the other hand, the flat rate, paushal, buzzword, is in the air. The contractor knows that he should try to finish the entire project on time, and preferably even earlier, in order to receive the financial award. He needs to prepare for the complex tasks ahead as early as possible. And this is reflected in the project schedule and therefore paths. On the 23rd month of the project, there is indeed a move toward agreement. The contractor needs to present a schedule that meets the flat rate goals. With the help of the project success expectation map and the histogram, we see that all the tasks have been compressed. the map in the red. In the histogram, the number of critical and hidden critical paths has increased. In 10% of the project duration, there are more than 50,000 paths, and in 5%, there are 1,874 paths with a duration slack of only 20 days. A month later, the situation improves. The contractor begins to gain a handle of things, executes tasks, and begins to wrap things up. And so, the project success expectation maps become optimistic, and the histograms of the paths begin to change. A few critical paths, more hidden critical paths. The number of paths, now at 20% of the project duration, decreases from 5,374 paths in the 25th month to 3,064 unique paths to 878 paths in the 28th month, 392 paths in the 29th month. In 20%, 393 unique paths were found, and 65 paths in the 31st month. In the 32nd month, we begin to close in towards the end. All that remains are final surface development throughout the project area and a checkpoint at the entrance to the hospital. At 20% project duration slack, there are only 10 paths. Starting from the 33rd month, all that remains are final touches and the beginning of handover. The following months are months in which final handover protocols and corrections are made. So, how did the project end? Scope of work, SOW. The entire SOW of the planned project has been completed, including a number of additions. Budget. The contractor's cost when signing the contract was 98 million new Israeli shekels, about $28 million. As part of the flat rate agreement, the budget was increased to 110 million shekels, about $31.5 million, in which 3 million shekels, less than $1 million, was due to shortening the schedule. In terms of schedule, the project was scheduled to end on September 13th, 2021. The project was completed on March 25th, 2021. That is, the project was shortened by 5.6 months. In conclusion, how can such a miracle be done? The miracle was enabled by three things. The first, working on a schedule together, not separately. The project owner, project manager, contractor, and scheduling consultant. Only if you work together with each other, shoulder to shoulder, and actually fight every issue that occurs, rather than fight each other, at that moment, you manage to finish the project even with a shorter schedule. The second, HCP-Go. Analysis of the basic schedule and analysis of the schedule each month gives both the project manager and the contractor crucial and accurate information, the structure of the project, and emphasis on the critical and hidden critical paths. In this way, we are surprised less, resulting in more control over the project, hence meeting deadlines or even shortening schedules. The third, without which defining the project schedule is impossible, is the issue of the schedule buffer. In this project, a 20% project buffer was set. Large portions of this buffer were utilized for the benefit of the project and its execution. On the subject of project buffer, how to use it, what to do with it, and how to shorten it, you can read about in the post hcp-consulting.com/time buffer. And besides, this is another lecture, completely separate. If you have any questions, please contact us. You can subscribe to our channel for more videos on project schedule management.